Howdy, howdy, folks. Once again, this is Donnie, and in today's video, we are going to demystify Ubuntu's Uncomplicated Firewall. But before we get into that, let's have a quick word from my sponsor. And my sponsor for today is me and my books. First up, we have Mastering Linux Security and Hardening, which is a good, comprehensive, hands-on guide that will help you configure your Linux servers and Linux workstations in the most secure manner possible. And we also have Linux Service Management Made Easy with Systemd, which is not a book about Systemd, it is the book about Systemd. It is the only book you will find anywhere that gives good, comprehensive, hands-on coverage of the entire Systemd ecosystem. So all that stuff that you've been chasing down on the web when you want to find, something, that pertains to Systemd, or when you want to figure out how to do something with Systemd, well, you don't have to do that anymore, okay? Just get my book and you can look it up in there, and makes it really, really handy. Both these books are good for Linux administrators, Linux security administrators, or for anyone who wants to become a Linux administrator. So be sure to check them out. The purchase links are in the video description below. Okay, now, some of you are probably out there saying, okay, if this Ubuntu firewall really is uncomplicated, why do we need to demystify it? Well, it's uncomplicated in the sense that you can do simple operations like opening a firewall port, or blocking a firewall port, or blocking access to somebody, stuff like that, the real simple stuff, with very, very simple commands that are easier than the iptables commands that you may have known about. But for other stuff, for doing anything more complex, well, you can do it with the uncomplicated firewall, but you can't do it with your regular uncomplicated firewall commands. So you have to know how to configure it, and unfortunately, Ubuntu does a very, very poor job of documenting all that. And you can see here we have the Ubuntu Wiki, which has a little bit of stuff here about it. It tells you a little bit, but not a whole lot. Basic usage. And a few other things. Well, you do have this UFW manual here. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, well, it's just the man page. So, same thing that you got, just a terse man page. You know how man pages are, right? But anyway, so you can scroll down there and see all that. And basically, this is the kind of stuff you can do with it, right? So, simple stuff, allowing stuff, denying stuff, but you can't really do anything that complex here from the command line. And then over here, we have another page which tells you a little bit more about it, but again, not a lot of detail here. It does tell you a little bit about the specific configuration files. It does tell you in here someplace that, yeah, you can do anything with UFW that you can do with iptables, but it doesn't really tell you how to do it. So, let's take a look at this. But before we do, we need to go over some basic terminology here just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, and so that everyone can understand what the uncomplicated firewall is all about. So first off, we have netfilter, which is the name of the actual firewall that is built into the Linux kernel. Now, the problem with netfilter is that human users cannot interface with it directly in order to configure it. So we need some helper applications. The the first one that came along was something called IP chains. Now, IP chains, it's now obsolete. It went away years and years ago and was replaced by something called iptables. Iptables is still with us and is still used in various different Linux distros. And then a few years ago, the Red Hat developers came out with something called nftables, which has some really, really important advantages over iptables. It's simpler to configure, and it also has some performance advantages. And one of the big advantages that nftables has over iptables is the fact that with iptables, you have one version of it for IPv4 and another for IPv6. So with iptables, if you have a dual stack configuration where you're running both IPv4 and IPv6 on your network, anytime you create some sort of a filtering rule or some sort of a firewall rule for IPv4, you have to duplicate that in IPv6. So does take a little bit more doing, right? With nftables, you have everything all in one configuration. Just like open a port for one and, well, you're opening it for both IPv4 and IPv6 at once. So it makes it a lot handier, right? But still, with either iptables or nftables, doing anything from the command line, even just opening a port, it involves some sort of a rather complex kind of command. And, most people aren't going to remember those commands off the top of their heads. At least I'm not. I always have to look it up every time, right? So we have had over the years various different front ends for iptables, and we now have one new front end for nftables as well. And Ubuntu, one of the most famous ones, came out with Uncomplicated Firewall, or UFW for short. And then a few years ago, Red Hat came out with something called Firewall D. Okay, so Firewall D, of course, is the default on all Red Hat type distributions and on SUSE distributions. And I did a video previously a while back on Firewall D, and I'll go ahead and put a link to that in the video description below. But for today, though, we're going to talk about the Uncomplicated Firewall, and we're going to see why it is so uncomplicated, and we're also going to take a brief look at how we can do more complex things with the Uncomplicated Firewall. Okay, so the Uncomplicated Firewall, if we're talking about everything up through Ubuntu 20.2004 or 20.04, we're dealing with iptables. And if we're dealing with Ubuntu, and let's do this. There we go. If we're dealing with Ubuntu 22.04, then we're dealing with nftables. Okay, so UFW, when you use the UFW, the Uncomplicated Firewall, and issue a UFW command on Ubuntu 20.04 or before, it is going to create a new iptables configuration. When you issue a UFW command on Ubuntu 22.04, it's going to issue a command that will configure nftables. Okay, so we got two different things there. And notice I'm only dealing with long-term support versions of Ubuntu here. Okay, I don't know what the interim versions have because I don't mess with them. I found out years ago that messing with those interim versions between the long-term support versions of Ubuntu, that's nothing but trouble. So I just don't do it anymore, okay? I just stick with the long-term support versions and be done with it. But anyway, so this is the deal, right? So we got NetFilter, which is the firewall code that's built into the Linux kernel. We have iptables and nftables, which will take our commands that we type into the command line and will inject those commands into the Linux kernel to configure the NetFilter firewall. And then down at the bottom we have the UFW, which will take the simplify commands that we type in at the command line and convert those commands to either iptables commands or to nftables commands. Okay, so hopefully everybody's clear. Hopefully that's not too confusing. Okay. Now, the other thing about iptables and nftables is that if you are starting out completely from scratch and you have a machine which does not have a firewall preconfigured on it, which is the case with most Linux distros, because historically only the Red Hat distros and the SUSE distros have come with the firewall already configured, right? So, or at least of the major distros. There are probably some other lesser known distros, I think, also had pre-configured firewalls. But for the most part, for the major distros, only the SUSE and the Red Hat distros have traditionally come with firewalls already set up and already configured. And so for Ubuntu or Debian, Slackware, whatever else that don't come with pre-configured firewalls or did not come with pre-configured firewalls back before UFW, setting up a firewall from scratch is really an involved process. And that's because setting up a firewall from scratch is more than just allowing ports or denying ports. It is a complex process which involves setting up a default policy to block everything that you don't want, and also setting up contract rules so that when your machine goes out and makes contact with another machine, then anything that gets sent from that machine, that other machine, will be allowed back in. Without the contract rules, all that stuff will be blocked, right? So, for example, if you're working on a workstation and you open your web browser and you go to contact a some sort of website, you go to load some sort of website, you need that contract rule in order to allow the stuff from that website back in. And you also have to set up your loopback interface, and there are a lot of different types of ICMP packets that you want to be blocked, certain types that you want to allow, and so you got to set all that stuff up, okay? So without some sort of a pre-configured firewall setup, then you're doing all that by hand, and it is an involved process. So, so with UFW, we do have all that work taken care of for us. Okay, now I do want to show you here. I got two different virtual machines here. I'm remoted into both of them. And first off, on this Ubuntu 20-04 machine, we can do systemctl status UFW. When you first install Ubuntu, the UFW service is already installed. Okay, it's already installed, and the service itself, the systemd service, is already enabled, as we see here. But if we do sudo UFW status, okay, we see that the UFW itself is actually inactive, which means it is not enforcing any firewall rules. Okay, so in order to activate that, we do sudo UFW enable, except I don't want to do that right yet because I am remoted into this machine, right? So if I do this right now, there's a good chance that I'll lock myself out, and I don't want to do that. So what I really want to do here is to open port 22. Now I could do that in two different ways. I could do it like that, or better yet, I could allow a service, because you can see here I'm in the etc UFW directory, and you see up at the top there I have that applications.d menu right there. So let's get into that. Okay, you see here that I have different profiles here for different applications. And so I have Apache and OpenSSH and Samba. And whenever you install a new package that involves some sort of a network daemon or network service, you're going to get a new profile installed here in this UFW directory. So what we can do now is do sudo UFW app list, like so. And so these are the available applications. So what I'm going to do now is do sudo UFW allow open SSH, and we have the rules are updated. Okay, and we can see there, yes indeed, there, these two bottom files right here, the user 6 rules and the user rules, are the ones that got updated. So we see there the user.rules is for IPv4, the user 6.rules is for IPv6. Anytime you issue some sort of a UFW command in order to open a port or close a port or deny or allow access to certain IP addresses or whatever else, these two files are going to get updated. Okay, so we can look in here. We can go ahead here and take a look in these files, except I need sudo okay, and you can see what's here. Now you see a lot of stuff there, a lot more than what we just did, and this stuff, this all comes pre-configured. So you are going to when you have the UFW, all your contract stuff, your default policy, your ICMP stuff, and also logging stuff in here. A lot of stuff in here too about, tells about the logs, the firewall logs, what you want to put in the firewall logs and all that stuff. And so all that stuff is pre-configured for you. So you don't have to mess around with doing it yourself. And then right here, this line, this is what I just did when I opened the firewall port for Secure Shell. Now, something very, very important here to remember is that this user 6 rules and user rules, both of these files are automatically generated by the UFW service. So if you try to hand edit either one of those two files, it's not going to work for you. Okay, I mean, the system will let you edit the files, but as soon as you reload the UFW configuration, it will change those files right back to where they were, and your edits will disappear. So don't ever try to edit either one of these two files by hand. Okay, it's just not going to work for you. Now that we have that, I can just go ahead here and do UFW enable. like so. And it might disrupt existing SSH connections. Well, it won't, because I did open up my SSH service. So now firewall is active and enabled on system startup. And so now we see it is indeed active, and we have the OpenSSH port open for both IPv4 and IPv6 from anywhere. And again, I could have added more to that command, to this command here, to to specify certain IP address I want to allow, or certain IP addresses I want to block, or whatever, right? But for now, I'm just keeping it simple, okay? Now, we can do like this. And we can see there all of our iptables rules, because again, this is all iptables under the hood, right? And I forgot to mention too there, when I was in that rules file, all those rules in there, those are just plain iptables rules. So if you know iptables, then you can go in and understand those various rules that are in there. Okay, and so yeah, a lot of stuff here already pre-configured for us. And let's see where our OpenSSH is here. There we go, right there. So this is, oopsie, there we go. There we go. That is our OpenSSH rule right there that I just added. All good, right? Now, as I said, this is Ubuntu 20.04. Now, let's go over here to 22.04. Now, 22.04 runs nftables as its backend instead of iptables. And iptables, of course, it's been around for a very long time, works well, but nftables works even better. So we can go in here to our rules, and I've already done some fancy stuff in here, so let's go ahead and do that. We can do sudo, oopsie, and help if I could learn how to type. There we go. All right, and again, I mean, it looks the same, and you're saying, wait a minute, Donnie, I thought you said we're using nftables here on 22.04. This still looks like the old iptables commands. And yeah, it does. Now, the reason for that is because a brand new feature of Ubuntu 22.04 is that in addition to switching over to nftables as its back end for the firewall, it added another really, really cool feature, which takes your iptables commands and automatically converts them to nftables commands. So because of that, they did not have to rewrite the configuration files for UFW. They were able to just leave them the same. And also, if you have any firewall scripts that are written with iptables commands, and if, let's say, you don't want to use UFW and you have all these scripts that you're going to run instead that are written with iptables commands, you don't have to take the time and jump through the hoops to convert them over to nftables commands. So that makes it really, really easy. Now, if you're on a Red Hat machine, which is using nftables as its backend as well, you're not going to be able to just write iptable stuff. You're not going to be able to use your iptable scripts because it does not have this cool feature. But Ubuntu has this really cool feature, makes it really cool. So, but anyway, this is our user.rules file. looks pretty much the same as the file for Ubuntu 20.04. And again, there is my rule, and I've already set this one up, but there's my rule there for opening my secure shell port. And I did not show you this IPv6 one over here on the other machine. So let's go ahead and look at that one. And again, it looks pretty much the same. As I said, anytime that you issue a UFW command to configure UFW, it's going to automatically update the configuration for both IPv4 and IPv6. Now, how about some of the fancy stuff I was telling you about? Well, first off, let's look at our different files here. And again, we said here that the user 6 and user rules files we cannot configure by hand because the system will not allow us to do that. So what we can do instead is use one of these other files. So we have like the before rules file and the before 6 rules files, where you can add different rules which will be processed before the user rules. And then we also have the corresponding after files where you can add rules that will be processed after the user rules. Okay, so let's say, for example, I want to add a set of rules which will block certain types of nmap scans. So we already said we can't hand edit the user rules files. So let's say that we want these rules to be processed before the user rules get processed. And also, let's say that we don't want these rules to be part of the filter table, right? We want them to get processed before we process the filter table in order to improve the performance. Okay, that way we don't have to read all through the rules in the filter table before we get to these. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, and I'm going to come down all the way down to here to the bottom. And again, this is all iptables type rules here, and they're all going to get converted to they're all going to get converted to nftables commands. Now, what I'm going to do here, or what I've already done, down here all the way down at the bottom, you see here, I added a stanza here to create a mangle table, which will get processed before our filter table. And you can see there that I added a contract rule there to drop invalid packets. And I also added another rule there which will prevent packets with just these flags. All right, so basically, and you know, I can't really go into details here right now to explain how all this works, but just the simplified explanation is that when you do an nmap scan, it sets various different flags in the different network packets in order to try to probe the machine, in order to probe a remote machine to see what services are running, to see what network ports are open, which ones are closed, and all that good stuff, okay? And by setting these two rules in this mangle table, I am going to block those different types of nmap scans, okay? And so you can see here that anytime we get a new packet, yeah, we're going to drop those packets which meet these criteria. So that's the basic, a good basic example of how you can do this. And again, this is this is the kind of stuff that you don't find in any of the official Ubuntu documentation. You got to find it elsewhere, like in my Linux Security and Hardening book, for example. Yes, I do have a write-up about it there. But anyway, we can now do sudo iptables -l like this. And yeah, even though it's running nftables here, the iptables command still works. And again, this is our line here for opening up the secure shell port. And we see nothing here about the mangle table. That's because this is nothing, looking at nothing but the filter table. So let's do this. Okay, so there then is my set of rules for blocking the Nmap scans up there in that pre-routing chain. And then, since we are running nftables on here, you do nftable or nft list rule set like so. And again, a lot of stuff there. And there is my mangle table, which I've added. And you can see that all those iptables commands that are in the UFW configuration files automatically get converted over to nftables commands. So really, really cool. Makes this really, really flexible. Okay, and again, up here we see all the stuff here that already configured for us. And again, with nftables, one of the big advantages is we have the IPv6 stuff and the IPv4 stuff all in one file. So you don't have to configure everything twice the way you did with iptables. So, really cool, right? So anyway, that then is just a quick rundown on the mysteries of Uncomplicated Firewall. And the key, again, is to know about these configuration files that are in the etc UFW directory. And just know that you can hand edit these before and after files. And just put normal iptables commands in them, and the same as you would when creating an iptable script, and you should be good, right? Oh yeah, and reload it too. You also have to do this. Anytime you edit those files, you do sudo UFW reload, like so, and that will read in the new configurations. Okay, so anyway, that's pretty much it. I do believe, as I said, just a good example there, the kind of stuff that you will not find in the official documentation for Ubuntu, for the UFW. And other than that, I think I'll leave it there. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to hit like and subscribe, and check out my books. Purchase links in the video description below. And I will see you next time.